Good morning, everyone. My name's Paul Woddy, and I'm here representing Focus HQ this morning. Although some of you may know me from my past, I worked previously for the Revit Corporation and for Autodesk, and then White Frog Publishing is another one of my companies. So I've been around doing this for a while, and in fact, I've spent sort of over 20 years teaching BIM, as we used to call it. Although nowadays we have to come up with half a page of explanation for what BIM is rather than just using the term BIM. And it seems that most of the 20 years I've spent changing my description of what I do and trying to decide what I should tell people, because we sort of a lot of terminology comes and goes. So we used to call it BIM, but then we decided we didn't like the building bit and we didn't like the modeling bit. So we now call it information management in some respects. And then we've got digital twins, and we've got, well, blockchain arrived, but then it disappeared again. I'm not sure whether that's going to come back. And the golden thread, obviously, is the new one. So a lot of the time, I just sort of chase my tail trying to come up with a terminology that includes all the latest buzzwords for what we actually try and do. And artificial intelligence, obviously, is the new kid on the block that everybody's got to have if they're anything about. So we've got an industry that is very much focused on, well, what is it focused on? It's focused on terminology. It's focused on trying to find its position. We are trying to digitize the sector. We're trying to move everybody to a better way of working. But in doing so, we seem to be tripping over what we're calling ourselves more than we are actually spending time making some major changes, it seems at times. And the landscape has certainly changed a lot over the 20 years that we've been looking at this. And for some reason, when it came to BIM, we started with the architects. We started educating the architects on what this digital journey should be. And most of the time, all we managed to do was to switch from 2D software to 3D software. And they kept on applying the same old processes to a new piece of technology. And I think that just proved that technology wasn't the solution. We then, once we'd got the architects moving a bit, we turned to the structural engineers, only to find that they'd been doing it for years and they were just waiting for us to wake up. The mechanical engineers, they still seem to treat it as a badge of honor that as soon as you become qualified, you stop using software. So they haven't moved on at all. So then we started talking to the contractors, and the contractors love anything if there's money attached. And they saw BIM as a major opportunity. So they did the right thing and trained their marketing teams about BIM, so they could reword the case studies to make out they'd been doing it for years. But they didn't actually look at the technology, they didn't look at the processes, they didn't try and change anything. They just deliver as they always have. And then, finally, we start to look at the owners and the facilities managers. And we sort of show them all this fancy stuff, all this shiny new toys we can give them, these fancy 3D models and animation and all sorts of connectivity. And they sort of largely turned around and said, why? Why should I pay for this? Why should I change? What good does this do me? And instead of us thinking that, you know, we've developed all these beautiful standards now, they're very mature standards, and therefore all we've got to do is bring the FM teams up to speed and job done. Everybody's happy. But what if? What if once the FM people and the owner-operators work out what digitization means for them, who's to say that they agree with what we've built for them? Who's to say that actually BIM 2.0 starts with them becoming awake? And that actually they're going to redevelop standards along the lines that they want. And then we have to catch up with them on the design and the construction side. And I think, for me, we've seen that sort of development of trying to sort of talk to the right audience, only to find, in many cases, that the audience we really want to get to, the people who are going to use the data in the long term, are still not convinced enough or not educated enough in the topic in order to understand what they want, how they want it, and what to ask for. Now, if this whole concept was a project, then we would have perhaps looked at it slightly differently. And I've got to say that as an industry, construction isn't very good at identifying projects in the same way that other industries are. We know that if we're going to deliver a school or a hospital or a bridge, we know that that's a project, and we apply good project management skills and resources to it, and we deliver the project. That's what we do well. But we're not very good at identifying some of the small stuff as being projects. We don't necessarily apply good project management to, for instance, the implementation of BIM, or the teaching of a team, of a project team in certain principles. We don't look at it as a project, and therefore we don't apply good project management rules. And I ask myself the question of, why do we separate project management from information management? We have BIM professionals that know what they're doing. They're following the ISO 19650 standards, and they are following those actions, those milestones and deliverables, and they're working their way through. And then we have project managers sitting in another office who know how to run a project. But the two are very unlikely to know each other or talk to each other very much. And we've got to ask ourselves the question of, why is that? Why shouldn't we learn from each other? And actually, when you look at those rules, this is the same 8 rules here, if you look at those rules and you actually start to compare them to the practices that we apply in BIM, well, actually, it's the same thing we're trying to do, it's just different language. We still need to understand the client requirements. We need to understand the core business objectives of a project in order to then realize those benefits. So why don't we track those benefits? Why don't we apply good project management to information management principles and find the best of both worlds? I've spent a long time studying the ISO standards, and I can play ISO bingo with the best of you. And when you look at mapping some of the standards we've got, in this case, in particular, if you see the columns on the far side there, this is parts 2, 3, and 5, extracting the activities from those standards, along with 41001, which you may or may not know, which is more aimed at the client, owner-operator side in preparation for, before you get to capital works, how do you prepare an organization for receiving digital data? So extracting the objectives from those standards and listing those out, and then mapping that across to who is going to be responsible and actively participating in that production is I've spent a long time sort of doing that and trying to understand how that all fits across the full works. Now, one of the offshoots of that, because of the training organization that I run with White Frog, is that we were looking at where do those skills apply? And if we're building qualifications, then when would you expect certain skills to come into the workforce? And therefore you can build a curriculum that matches up with so it's career mapping and road mapping. So we've got those sorts of principles, and we understand the actions that need to come out of these standards. We understand who needs to deliver them. We understand where they need to be. But how do we capture that in a way that we can deliver it as a project, and we can understand it in the bigger context of things? Because a list of actions is not project management. Now, what I've got is the seamless plug. Focus HQ is a project portfolio management tool. And what that tool does is to aggregate information from multiple projects such that the senior executives have got clarity on a simple dashboard of of what's going on across their entire portfolio, and then they can drill down as they need to. But in this context, what we're able to do in the software is to template typical projects that we run. And so what I've done is to take that list of actions and milestones and activities and the responsibility for those actions, and I've put that into the software as a template so that we can then assign dates and we can assign responsibility to individuals. But what we can also do within this is then to start to look at our existing staff and understand from them what are the key risks that we've experienced on previous projects. What are the benefits that we're trying to realize as we do this? What are the sort of the resource restraints and the budgetary sort of implications of certain actions that we take? And being able to capture all of that wealthy IP in a format that we can then repeat on other projects is something that we as an industry need to sort of look more closely at. Because at the moment, a lot of that knowledge, a lot of that experience is simply held within the heads of key members of staff. Experienced project managers, experienced information managers who've done 10 projects, 20 projects, and know what those risks are. But those people leave the business and the knowledge goes with them. So how do we capture that knowledge? How do we make sure that we can train up new project managers and new BIM managers to be able to deliver projects using that wealth of IP? And that's what this is about. It's being able to template that knowledge and be able to take that on board in order to move it forward to the next generation. Okay, that's it. I know I'm a bit short there, but I thought I'd leave some time for questions.
Thank you, Paul.